Today's American culture tends to overlook the youth population and their role in the civil arena. But this has not always been the American way. In the founding era, young Americans made exceptional contributions to the development of the United States. They were scientists, diplomats, theologians, and soldiers. They were America's unsung heroes. Until now. Join historian David Barton as he traces America's history back to the source in Building on the American Heritage. Uncover the forgotten stories, examine the nation's founding documents, and discover firsthand our founding fathers' original intent. Explore the morals and values America was built on centuries ago. Learn the truth of America's past so you can shape America's future. This is Building on the American Heritage.
All right, David, our topic today is about education and the youth of the Founding Fathers. They seem to be at a younger age and have a totally different expectation of how the young people would learn.
Well, for actually not just Founding Fathers, I mean, you can go to the first 350 years of American education and you'll find that the product we created with youth is totally different than what we have today. I mean, there's so many great examples that you can point to of that. Being a cowboy myself, I live on a ranch. Pony Express is really intriguing for me. I love the fact, and I try to think about what it would have been like, because you had folks riding from St. Joe, Missouri, all the way to San Francisco. That's half the nation, and you do it 10 days on horseback. Wow. You make that, and it's dangerous.
And that's solo too, right?
The solo individuals. You're having to fight along the way from bandits or Indian attacks or whatever to get the mail through. And no Pony Express rider was over 18 years old. They were all 17 and under.
Well, we would say today are kids.
You bet.
But
I mean, you know, today we do Pony Express pictures. Like, how's that guy look to you?
About 35.
Yeah, hey, that's about 2 Pony Express riders, because they were a lot younger. A great example of a Pony Express rider is this guy right here. His name is Bronco Charlie. Now, you see the picture of Bronco Charlie. Bronco Charlie, 11 years old, was a Pony Express rider. 11 years old, he's on a horse riding from St. Joe, Missouri, all the way to San Francisco. And by the way, he was already an accomplished bronc buster at the age of 8. So here's a guy riding horses and breaking horses at 8 years old. At 11 years old, he's an accomplished Indian fighter and bandit fighter and facing daily death, rides. You know, what an amazing thing.
Obviously, back then, they didn't consider them to be
there was
kids.
no such thing as adolescence. I mean, you were being trained for an adult from the time you were born. There's no biblical precedent for adolescence. That's a modern innovation we've come up with. You were born to be productive. You're born to do something to your life and make a difference with your life, and the sooner you get started, the better it is. Now, you take Maria Mitchell. Maria Mitchell in the 1820s is the first woman in America to discover a comet with a telescope. She actually set up an observatory where in her observatory she trained women for science and trained them with astronomy and telescopes and how to use telescopes.
You said 1820, so she's in the 1800s.
1820s, and 1800s. Grab this. When she was 11 years old, she was a teaching assistant in astronomy at the age of 11. At the age of 12 years old, she calculated the time of forthcoming eclipse. And at the age of 18, she was running her own school for women in astronomy and sciences, etc. We wouldn't even think of that today. Maybe after 5 PhDs, you know, maybe when you're 35, you can do. No. She's doing the school on her own at the age of 18. Or military-wise, like take the Civil War, great example. Civil War, the newspapers from hometown would cover the hometown heroes just as they do today with the war on terror, anything else. Hey, here's our local guy, he's in Afghanistan or he's in Iraq or wherever he is. Back then, papers did the same thing. So if you go to the Indiana Register for February the 10th of 1864, they're covering the hometown heroes. And they talk about one of the hometown heroes, a guy named John Clem. And they said little John Clem, and they report that he was a hero of the Battle of Chickamauga. And because of that, what happened was General Rosecrans elevated him to a sergeant because of bravery he had demonstrated in battle. Then General Thomas came through and said, no, I need him on my staff, and raised him to a lieutenant. So he's been promoted on the battlefield for bravery and heroism, made a sergeant. Now he's been promoted to a lieutenancy on General Thomas's staff. And the last line in the newspaper is, John Clem is but 12 years old.
12 years old.
12 years old. He's a hero.
Upgraded to lieutenant.
Yeah, already a lieutenant in the military at 12 years old. And there's example after example after example. You take John Morant, the first black American to be a successful missionary to Native Americans, 13 years old. Was evangelizing among the Cherokee Indians, learned the language, going tribe to tribe, sharing Christ, 13 years old. This is incredible achievement, but there was a different thinking mentality back then, a different system of education, different philosophy. We didn't train our kids to waste as many years you can in adolescence. Hey, God put you here for a purpose, and you need to get on with that purpose and find what that purpose is. So if it's Pony Express, if it's military, if it's science, if it's theology, if it's missionary work, doesn't matter what it is. That's what we wanted to happen, and that's such a different paradigm from what we have today. But history and Bible proves that it's a very successful and very doable paradigm, that our kids can do a whole lot more than what we think they can, and we've got to be the ones to kind of push them in that direction.
Okay, Dave, time to pick up some questions from across the nation on youth.
Sounds good.
Why did schools in America switch from 8 grades to 12?
Okay, we got to keep my kids from watching this one. I don't want them complaining about we have 12 and they only had 8.
There is a big difference in the objective of education then and now. The objective was to get an amount of knowledge, not how long you were in school.
Yeah.
See, what happened was from the founding era, and actually the first public school law in America was passed in 1647. From that time up until the 1920s, we said the objective is to teach you how to think. Because if you can learn to think, you can learn knowledge. In the 1920s, with Dewey and so many progressive that redid education, we not only went into compulsory education, saying you have to attend, and we not only went to saying how many years you're going to be there, we also went into teaching students no longer how to think, but how to learn. And so the difference became not use your brain, the difference became listen to your teacher. Your teacher knows everything. And so we changed from the type of testing we did into, in the 1920s and forward, we started doing multiple choice, true, false, fill in the blank. In other words, the teacher will tell you what you need to know, you just spit it back to it.
Yeah.
So that's not training how to think. Great example. Here's a nice little, well, just read it. What's it say up top?
So it's a fourth grade question, and it's on geography.
And it's from Chicago, 1862.
1862.
It's public schools. Kids have got 35 minutes to take this test. So we're talking all kids, Chicago, public school kids, not your elite kids, not your advanced kids. This is public school kids. This is the type of knowledge we had in 4th grade in 1862. Read some of the questions.
Let's see, how many degrees wide are the temperate zones?
4th grade.
What is a watershed? Name the principal animals of the frigid zones. I'm failing already, man.
I was just thinking, I wonder how many today could pass a 4th grade test from 1862.
What portion of the people on the globe are pagans? What portion Christians?
4th grade question.
4th grade.
4th grade.
What's 4th grade now? I guess that's
well, that'd be 10 years old.
11 years old.
But see, the difference was then that you didn't start guaranteed at 5 or 6 or whatever. See, one of the founding fathers, a great example, John Trumbull. John Trumbull had finished reading through the Bible from cover to cover when he was 4 years old. First time.
4 years old.
4 years old. And that was not an uncommon feat. Lots of kids did that, but today we'd say, I don't care how smart you are at 4, you can't start till you're 6.
And I'm guessing that's probably at home. They're learning to read at home.
They were learning to read at home. They were learning to read in a variety of manners. As a matter of fact, let me take you to this. Oh, open that and tell me what you got there.
This is, I'm afraid to break it, but what is it? It is I see Testament. Maybe I can make that one out.
Go to the middle. What do you see in the middle? Anything you understand?
Not a word.
It looks like Greek to you.
It looks like Greek because I'm guessing it is?
It is.
All
Now,
right,
that
so
is a Greek New Testament. Now, here's the deal. At the age of 13 years old in America, most kids could translate the Greek New Testament into English.
13 years old.
13 years old. Translate it from Greek into English. Now, not only could they, but if you went to any of the major universities, and if you went to Harvard or Dickinson, or if you went to William and Mary, if you went to Yale, if you went to Princeton, if you went to Brown, if you went to any of these universities, your entrance exam was you had to prove that you could translate from Greek into English.
Before you could even get in?
Get in. And you had to be trilingual to get to the university. And by the way, the average age, very common age at which they went to university then was 13 years old. Very common to be in university at 13. But your entrance exam is you have to show that you're fluent in Latin and Greek and English, the 3. Your freshman project is you take that Greek New Testament, you make a translation into English, particularly the book of John. That's your freshman project. You're 13 years old when you're doing this.
And this is 200 years ago.
This 250
years ago.
See,
and that's a 1750.
Knowledge was the objective, not how many years you're in school. And we used a different process to achieve knowledge, and it's teach you how to think. Today we teach you how to learn. Don't think. We'll do the thinking for you. See, it's centered, that we say the kids are the center of education. It's not. The teacher's the center of education. And that's a whole difference.
The system has become more important than the students themselves.
This is a spelling book. It's called Webster's Blueback Speller for obvious reasons. This is the 1908 version. It was introduced in 1782 for the next 150 years till about the 1930s or 40s. This is the spelling book every kid used. Now, what we've got here is, and it says, by the way, elementary spelling book. So these are your beginning spelling words. You want to take a shot at some of these spelling words?
You're not. You're going to put me.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh, great. I don't have to spell them.
Well, we both.
I can't even say them, let alone spell
That's
them.
why I give it to you, because I don't want to have to pronounce
yeah,
them.
thanks. Let's see. Oligarchy, I know that one.
Yeah. Exactly.
Ichthyology?
Probably ichthyology, but I'm not even sure.
Ichthyology, okay. Yeah, forget it.
And that's elementary
now.
spelling. That's every kid in America doing that for 150 years. Now, could we even introduce that into postgraduate work today? Probably not.
Well, and the fact that they used it for that long, it was clearly successful.
150 years.
Why did we get away from it then?
Well, see, we got in that progressive thing in the 20s where we changed the whole focus of education. So today we keep tweaking the edges. Hey, it's time to blow up the system and go back to what worked.
Yeah.
We had here's Colorado. This is the exit questions for 8th grade work in Colorado. Let me just read some of the questions they've got on government. Now, this is 8th grade stuff. You're an attorney. I do constitutional work all the time. I've been involved in a bunch of cases of the U.S. Supreme Court. You do all this litigation work. Here's just some good old basic civics questions for 8th graders in Colorado in 1925. Give the qualifications as given in the Constitution for president, senator, and rep. In other words,
so they got to list the ages,
all the ages, how many years old, how many years they have to have lived, and say, we had to know that in 8th grade. Now, most attorneys could not do that today.
Yeah.
Name some powers denied the states by the Constitution, and conversely, powers denied the federal by the states.
Yeah.
So list those powers. If a man be accused of a crime in one state and is found in another state, how may he be brought to trial in the other state? Now, that's in the legal process. That's 8th grade. This is technical stuff that you get in law school. This is 8th grade knowledge in Colorado, rural state.
Well, and that was only 85 years ago, 1925. So we had not yet begun our slide down.
This is the early part of progressives introducing the new concepts that dominated by the 30s and took over by the 40s.
Yeah.
So we're really into it. One other example I'll use here, this is a book by Robert Troup Payne. This is out of the founding era. I mentioned these guys often 13 years old in college, whatever. This is a list of the debates that he had in college. Now we're thinking 13 years old, so they called them forensics. Here's the stuff they had to debate. Is there more to be gained or more to be lost by a new translation of scriptures for common use? I'm sorry, I don't know a clear answer to that one, but that's the point. Yeah. There's not a clear answer. Develop your arguments, put out cogent reasoning, and then go after each other, point out the weaknesses. Here's another forensic. Is it more dangerous to believe too much or to believe too little? A 13-year-old forensic. Another forensic. The conduct of the patriots who destroyed the tea in Boston Harbor in 1773, is that conduct to be praised or condemned?
Wow.
13 years old. So we were teaching kids how to think, not how to learn. And there's a vast difference. So yeah, there is a difference in education. They could do it in 8 years back then. It takes us 12. We're not getting anywhere close to what they got in 8 years because the focus is different. It's not how many years you're in school, it's how much knowledge you gain when you're in school. And you couldn't get out of school till you could demonstrate you had that knowledge. Now, in 8th grade, you might be 12 years old, you might be 22 years old, but you had to have the knowledge before you got out.
And some may start later than others, rather than having this cookie-cutter thing where we're going to put everybody through the same thing at the same age.
The compulsory education system of the 1920s that said you're going to go to school for this many years, and you're going to start when you're this age, and you're going to move to the next class. No, we moved to the next grade when the knowledge was right for moving to the next grade. So you might go through 2 grades in a year.
Okay, let's get another question on education.
Was education in the founding era only for the elite?
Good question. So did everybody get the kind of education you've been talking about, or was it only for select few?
Let me answer a question by asking a question. When's the last time you've seen a comet?
Never.
Never? You've never seen a comet?
Never.
John Adams said, you're more likely to find a comet in America than you are to find someone who can't read in America. So
No
how
kidding.
thorough
So
was their education?
Essentially everybody
could
then
read.
had that ability to
Everybody
read.
could read. Now, let's take that and compare that to where we are today. Because in America, prior to 1962, and by the way, 62 is when the court said no more religion and education. We don't want voluntary prayer. We don't want voluntary scriptures. It's got to be secular. We want secular education. So prior to 62, 63, America was #1 in the world in literacy. We had the highest literacy rate. We had more people who could read than any other nation per capita, percentage-wise, than any other nation in the world. We're now 65 in the world in literacy.
In only 40 some odd years,
40 some
we went
odd
from
years.
#1 to 65.
Education back in the founding era, everybody got an education. Everybody could read. If you look at the Federalist Papers, I mean, the Federalist Papers, that's the greatest commentary ever written on the U.S. Constitution. The Federalist Papers we study in law schools today. That's postgraduate stuff. The Federalist Papers were letters to the editors in New York newspapers of 1788 for the New York farmers.
And that's tough reading. I'm going to tell you, I have a hard time getting through the Federalist Papers. It's hard
You
reading,
betcha.
and that was for your average New York
That
farmer.
was an average letter to the editor for a New York farmer in 1788.
How did we go so, if we were #1 in the world, and then in a few short years would become number 65,
Yeah.
and compared to what the founders did, how do you
That's-
mess up your education system that bad?
That's part of that thing where we've changed the whole purpose of education. It's no longer gaining of knowledge. It is now teacher-centered indoctrination, and we don't teach kids how to think. We teach them how to learn, and that's not the way God designed us. God designed us to use our brain. We're told in the scriptures that we're to love God with our heart, soul, body, mind. We don't use the mind much. We don't train the mind much. We train the memory some to regurgitate back whatever the teacher tells us, but we've just changed the whole philosophy of education. And by the way, the scripture says in Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. If you want to know something, if you want to be smarter, you start with the fear of the Lord.
But we took that out
And
in
now we've said,
62.
oh, you can't do that in schools, which is interesting that if you look at schools that still use the fear of the Lord, whether they're homeschooled or Christian schooled or parochial school or whatever, they average 2 to 4 grade levels higher than public schools for a whole lot less money. They are at the average of pre-1962 numbers. So you have, in those schools that still have some acknowledgement of God, you still got really high
So
educational
it's
results.
not just a ceremonial thing to acknowledge
No,
God.
no.
It has an impact on the result of the education.
It's only a ceremonial thing if God is like Buddha or anybody else that is dead and gone. If God is still alive and active in the earth, and if He tells you that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, not spiritual knowledge, of knowledge, if He tells you that and He's still alive, then it's still going to work. And that's what we demonstrate today with statistics. So you look back in the founding era, I mean, the Bible was the textbook from which everyone learned to read.
Yeah.
The fear of the Lord is part of education. And by the way, you're more likely to see a comet than you are to find any person in America that cannot read.
Okay, time for another question from the audience.
Sounds good.
I've heard some of the founding fathers were very young. Even the signers, did they start their careers earlier than we do today?
I guess that's true. Some of them, I think there was, what, a 26-year-old on the Constitution? That's pretty young.
That is fairly young, but it goes back to the philosophy of education. We were after, again, the attainment of knowledge, of being able to think. And how early do kids start thinking? Well, if you got kids, you know they start thinking really early. One of the things that's been shown is that by the time a child is 5 years old, he's gained 50% of all the knowledge he'll ever gain in his life. By the time he's 6 years old, he's gained 60% of all the knowledge, and then after that it slows down a lot.
Yeah.
You look at what John Adams said to Abigail. John Adams was overseas in the Revolution. Abigail's at home raising the young kids, and the guidance he gives her, and remember, when you talk to your kids, don't use that baby talk stuff because you're like teaching them several languages. He said you start talking to them as adults, you use regular words, you use big vocabulary words because they can comprehend it. Good example of that is this blueback speller we had a minute ago.
Yeah.
That thing written by Noah. Now, Noah Webster's a founding father. He fought in the American Revolution. He was a legislator, he's a judge. He's the guy who said, hey, if we don't take what we know as founding fathers and pass it on to the next generation, America won't survive, and that's why he started writing textbooks. And in that period of time, he just turned out a bunch of textbooks.
Not just for the purpose of knowledge, but to literally pass to the next generation.
He turned out textbooks on history, on government, on banking, on meteorology, on animal husbandry, on manners. I mean, you name it, he's writing textbooks on it. So you take this one, and back then we had no teachers' colleges to teach teachers. So what they would do is in the front of the book, he would include guidance for the teachers. And says, now, whoever's teaching this, you need to know this. And he would say, I acknowledge that the words in this work seem to be somewhat difficult. He says, but you have to remember that students love a challenge. He said, if you ever go down to the level where they are, they will drop, and you'll have to go down again, and they will drop, and you have to. He says, you hold the standard up here, they will come up to that standard. They love a challenge. Hence, the words that we used for 150 years in elementary education.
And that's the opposite of what we do now, because we do bring it down.
And so when you look, specifically a question about the Founding Fathers, yes, you have folks like William Livingston, who's a signer of the Constitution, who when he was 14 years old was already a missionary among the Mohawk Indians. Mohawks considered the most ferocious tribe in America at the age of 14. You have individuals like James Iredell, who ratified the Constitution. George Washington put him on the Supreme Court. When he was 17 years old, he was the chief financial officer in his section of North Carolina, running all the finances of the state. 17 years old, the chief economist in the area. You take Andrew Jackson, when he was 13 years old, Andrew Jackson, born in the founding era, and he became a president, 7th president. When he was 13 years old, he'd already been in the American Revolution so much, he was a prisoner of war at the age of 13 years old.
13-year-old prisoner of war?
You're fighting in the war? Matter of fact, let me grab something here. I'm going to show you something real quick. This is an original musket from the American Revolution. Now,
wow.
I am slightly taller than you are, and you're a whole lot taller than the soldier in the American Revolution
No
was.
kidding, I'm finally tall
Yeah,
for
you're
once.
tall.
I like this story. Where are we going?
Well, the average soldier in the American Revolution, a little over 5 feet. So, this is what he has to work with. Take that and have a look at it.
That is not light.
That is not light. Now, your kids, what age is your kids?
14 down to 8.
You got an 8-year-old?
Just turned 8.
How tall is he?
Let's see, with ball cap on, he's probably about right there.
All right, he's about there, and we're taller in this generation by far than they were then, so let's put an 8-year-old down about here. Now we're
and
talking
holding a gun this heavy.
John Quincy Adams, when he was 8 years old, musket out with the Massachusetts Minutemen going after the British. Age of 8?
At 8 years old.
At 8 years old?
Wow.
Look at the size of that gun and look at him. Yeah, Founding Fathers started early because we had a different philosophy by which we did things. Now, the other interesting thing about John Quincy Adams is just consider at 8 years old, he's out with the Massachusetts Minutemen with the musket going after stuff. Let me point you back behind here. You see that stack of books? Now that's the diary, the memoirs of John Quincy Adams.
That's a big diary.
Yeah, he started when he was 11 years old writing a diary. He kept it for the next 68 years of his life till he died at the age of 79. Now in that time, he is an American diplomat, 5 different countries. He's a Secretary of State, he's the U.S. Senator, he's a state senator, he is a U.S. Congressman, he's a President of the United States, all in there. And in his diary, as he would write in it for each day, it's not a little thing like, well, I got up at 4:30 and went to work at 5:30. He would have 8, 10, 12 pages a day of everything he did, what he thought, what was going on. Interesting thing, it starts when he's 11 years old. Now, why would it start then? Because at the age of 11, he got a congressional diplomatic appointment overseas to Europe as, wait a minute, official diplomatic appointment
at 11 years old. See, I was trying to think, why would an 11-year-old be doing a journal in the first place, or even be willing to take the time at 11 years old?
Well, see, that was the other thing we taught in America was every student should keep a journal. So every kid did that. I mean, that's just part of who we were. Ladies did that, guys did that. You're writing, you're thinking, you're using your brain, you're communicating, you're putting stuff together. So at 11, he gets his first appointment. At the age of 14, he gets his second congressional appointment. They sent a 14-year-old John Quincy Adams to the court of Catherine the Great in Russia. And he was secretary to the ambassador because the ambassador in Russia didn't know French and needed somebody in Russia who could speak French, so they sent John Quincy Adams,
14 years old. So we got to think in today's terminology, that's a freshman in high school.
That's a freshman in high school who has been sent to the court of Catherine the Great on his own. And by the way, when he left from England to go to Russia, he crossed, I think it was 8 different countries at that time. He did it all by himself at the age of 14, negotiated all the money, negotiated all the languages, rode the stagecoaches and the horses all the way over to Russia, and it was freezing cold when he got to Russia, but they need a French translator in Russia, and so he's officially sent by You got to be pretty good at French.
14 years old.
And by the way, that's the other interesting thing about his diary is when you read it on Sundays, it's really scary. I mean, because he also does a whole lot of extra Bible work. And he does a lot of Bible work anyway. He actually believes you should read through the Bible from cover to cover once every year. He did that. On Sundays, he'll say, well, as I look at Romans 8 in the Greek, Looks like the French translation's pretty good. It's actually better than the Germans did, but the Russian's not bad. He reads the Bible in 7, 8 languages every Sunday.
And this is
takes
not
it
with
back
a
to the original.
software program that's
Oh, no.
pulling them all
Oh,
up
no.
for you.
No.
He's doing it with you.
And so the question, were the Founding Fathers doing things in much younger? Yes, because we had a different expectation, different philosophy of education. They definitely are capable of doing that. It's been proven for hundreds of years. We've moved into a different philosophy now, but they really believed that you could use your mind, that you could do things at an early age, and they did.
So what's the lesson we should take from that in terms of how to challenge our next generation? I mentioned I've got them from 8 to 14. I want to challenge them to be like that.
One of the things is we have so goofed up our culture today that we place no expectation on kids. Matter of fact, we want them to linger in adolescence as long as they can. We don't want you to be a responsible adult and really be productive. If we can keep you in a youth group and if we can keep you, enjoying doing nothing for several years, we're going to prolong as much as possible. Go to college and have a good time, party while you're in college.
Find yourself for 5, 6, 7 years.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a whole different approach from what we used to have. And literally, the expectation of the government today for every young person is, kids, here's what we want of you. We want you to not kill someone and pay taxes. If you can not kill someone and pay taxes, you're a perfect citizen of the United States.
That's a pretty low bar.
That's a low bar. That's what our society is so mediocre. What we have to do as parents and as adults, as grandparents, whatever else, encourage kids like Webster said, these are some challenges, but kids will come up to the challenges.
Raise the
Raise
expectations.
the bar, raise the expectation. Make it a challenge, kids will do it.
I wonder if you think, I've noticed lately talking to a lot of families where 17 and 18-year-olds are already got a way head start in college, some of them finishing at 19. This is mostly in the homeschool community, but are we starting to see some trends to come back to this?
We're using that to prove that, see, you can do it a lot younger. You can be done with college by the time. If you're Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Rush, Founding Father, signer of the Declaration, the top physician in America, the father of American medicine, graduated from Princeton when he was 14 years old.
Not started
14.
Princeton, graduated Princeton
when he was
14.
14 years old. Now other Founding Fathers, Fisher Ames, framer of the Bill of Rights, did the First Amendment in the House, etc. He started college when he was 13 years old, and we think, oh, that's way too young. No, that was really typical. Mentioned earlier, John Trumbull finished reading through the Bible when he was 4 years old. When he was 6 years old, he beat his minister in a Greek contest. When he was 7.5 years old, he passed the entrance exam to Yale University. Now his parents said, we're going to hold you out until everybody else goes. So they held him out until he was 13. 13, they held him out. So we're proving with homeschoolers and with others that you can do a whole lot more than what culture expects of you. It's real possible. I mean, that's what we did for thousands of years. That's what America did for hundreds of years. And we're starting to get away from that paradigm that has forced us into mediocrity and failure. And we're getting back down to saying, hey, young people really are productive. They are sharp. Look at all the things they're doing at a much younger age than what we thought in our generation could be done. And that's a really healthy thing for the country.